I never thought I'd end up telling this kind of story. I always saw myself as a good judge of character, someone who could tell when something didn't feel right. But what happened to me proved that no matter how smart or cautious you think you are, someone can always outlie your instincts. I met Alyssa on a crisp fall afternoon at a community fundraiser in Asheville. She stood out, not just because of her beauty, but because there was something quiet and wounded about her. You could tell she had been through something heavy. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. In fact, she seemed like the kind of person who was trying to stay invisible. I offered her a bottle of water and made a light joke to break the ice. She smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was the start of everything. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. At the gym, at a bookstore, at a coffee shop. Eventually, we exchanged numbers, started talking, and little by little, she opened up. She told me she was a widow. Her husband had died in a house fire 3 years ago. The story was tragic. He had been home alone. She was out running errands. And by the time she got back, the house was engulfed. The flames had destroyed everything. The fire report said the body was unrecoverable. Her pain seemed so real, I never doubted her. She didn't like talking about the past too much, and I respected that. I figured if she was slowly letting me in, that was enough. We started dating seriously, and it wasn't long before I fell in love. I didn't just love her, I admired her. She was strong, thoughtful, and always had this way of being present, like she had learned to treasure every second of life because she knew how fast it could be taken away. After about a year, I proposed. I didn't even think twice. She broke down in tears, said she never thought she could love again, never thought she'd feel safe again. And I believed her. I truly thought I was helping her write a new chapter. We had a small courthouse wedding, just a couple of my friends and two of hers. No family. She told me most of her family was either gone or estranged, and she didn't want to dredge up old wounds. I respected her wishes, maybe too much. We moved into a cozy home just outside of Charlotte. I ran a small construction business, and she worked part-time at a local nonprofit. Life was quiet, stable, even beautiful. She was frugal, thoughtful, and supportive. She had full access to everything, my finances, my home, my time, because I never had a reason to doubt her. Looking back now, I realize that's exactly what she counted on. She knew how to earn trust, how to seem broken enough that no one would think she was capable of deception. Then came that business trip to Nashville. It was a simple job, 2 days of site visits, some meetings, and I'd be back home. On my last evening there, I stopped by this diner I used to love during my college days. I was sitting by the window, eating a late dinner, when a guy walked in and sat across the room. He looked rough, scruffy beard, old coat, walked with a slight limp, but something about his face made me glance a second time. He kept looking at me too. After a few minutes, he stood up, walked over and asked, "Are you married to Alyssa?" I stared at him. "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately, just reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo. It was Alyssa, younger, smiling, standing next to him. They were clearly a couple. "I'm Mark Barnes," he said, "her husband." I froze. My mouth went dry. "She told me you were dead." He looked down at the floor, then back at me. "Yeah, that's what she told me too. Until now." I stared at him. I didn't know whether I was being pranked or scammed or what. But something in his eyes told me he wasn't lying. He said he'd faked his death years ago, said he owed some dangerous people money, and the only way out was to vanish. Alyssa helped him disappear. She knew what he was doing, she was in on it. But after the stage fire, she took money from their account and never contacted him again. He hadn't seen her since, and now, suddenly, he learns she's married again. To me, I asked for proof, and he had it. Marriage license, ID, even old court records. Everything checked out. I sat there stunned. Everything I believed about my marriage, the love, the trust, the grief, was built on a lie. And that's when I knew. I had to go home and confront her. Because the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built a life with, was still married to someone else. And she never told me. I got home the next morning just after sunrise. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything but replay that conversation with Mark over and over again in my head. It felt like my whole world had flipped upside down in the span of one dinner. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel as I pulled into the driveway. I just sat there for a few seconds, watching the curtains in our bedroom window move slightly in the breeze like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. When I walked through the front door, the smell of fresh coffee hit me. Alyssa was in the kitchen, still wearing her robe, flipping pancakes on the stove like it was any other Sunday morning. She turned around and smiled when she saw me. "You're back early," she said. Just like that. So casual, so normal. I stood there for a second just staring at her. She didn't notice at first. She just kept cooking like I hadn't just returned from meeting the husband she claimed had died in a fire. Finally, I said his name. Just one word. "Mark." She froze. The spatula slipped out of her hand and hit the floor. She didn't move to pick it up. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there like a statue facing the stove. Then slowly she turned to me. Her face was pale. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she was caught. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lash out. I was too numb for all that. I just asked her why. Why she lied. Why she never told me the truth. Why she let me marry her when she knew Mark was still alive. She didn't answer right away. She walked over to the sink, turned off the faucet even though it wasn't running, and took a deep breath. Then she looked at me and said, "I thought he was dead to me. I really did." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You helped him fake his death," I said. "You knew exactly what happened. You were part of it, then you took his money and disappeared." She shook her head like she was trying to convince herself more than me. "It wasn't like that. I told her I had met him, that he showed me proof, marriage license, documents, everything. I told her he was willing to talk to the police, that he wasn't trying to get back at her. He just wanted to make sure I knew the truth." She sat down at the kitchen table and covered her face with her hands. And then the tears came. Real, messy, ugly crying. But it didn't move me. Not anymore. I had given this woman years of my life. I had trusted her with everything I had. And now I was realizing that everything I thought was real between us had started with a lie. A lie she never corrected. A lie she never came clean about. Not even when we said our vows. She told me she was scared. That when Mark disappeared, she didn't know if he'd ever come back. That she panicked. That she needed a fresh start. And when I came into her life, she saw a way out. A way to be someone else. A chance to be free. She said she never meant to hurt me, but she did hurt me. She could have told me the truth before we got married. She could have come clean when we were dating. She could have done the right thing at any point. But she didn't, because she didn't think she'd get caught. I told her I couldn't stay in the house with her. I needed space. I packed a bag, got in my truck, and drove straight to a friend's place. I didn't sleep that night either. I just kept going over the last few years in my head, trying to find the signs I missed. Every quiet moment, every vague answer, every time she shut down when I asked about her past. I thought I was being respectful. I thought I was giving her room to heal. But really, she was just hiding. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I needed to know my options. Because as far as I understood it, I had married a woman who was already married. That made our marriage invalid. My lawyer confirmed it. And what's more, what Alyssa did could be considered a felony. Bigamy, fraud, identity deception. Depending on how far she went, she could be facing real charges. I didn't want to destroy her life. As crazy as it sounds, I still didn't want to ruin her completely. But I also couldn't protect her. I couldn't carry the weight of her lies anymore. So I went to the authorities. I told them everything. I gave them copies of the documents Mark had shown me. I gave them Alyssa's fake maiden name, the timeline she had told me, even some old papers I found in a locked drawer at home, photos and envelopes addressed to her under her original last name, which she never legally changed. The investigators were stunned. It wasn't every day they saw a case like this. They opened a file and started digging. It didn't take long for them to find more.
Turns out Alyssa had used at least 2 other names in different states. Not necessarily for crime, but for starting over. She'd worked under aliases, opened bank accounts under different last names. It was enough to prove she had been deliberately hiding her identity, and enough to move forward with charges. She was arrested at the house 4 days later. I wasn't there when it happened. I didn't want to be. I didn't want to see her face again, but part of me wished I had watched her get let out in cuffs, because maybe then it would have finally felt real. Instead, I found out through a friend who lived down the street. Said it happened around noon. No yelling, no struggle, just a quiet arrest. Like she knew it was only a matter of time. And just when I thought it was over, she did one more thing. From jail, she wrote me a letter. It arrived 2 weeks after her arrest. It was handwritten, 4 pages long, and sealed in a plain envelope. She started off with, "I'm sorry," but it quickly turned into a plea. Not for forgiveness, but for silence. She begged me not to speak about it publicly. Said if I ever truly loved her, I'd let it all go and let her disappear again. That was the moment I knew she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was just sorry she got caught. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Marcus. He wasn't just alive. He'd been intentionally in hiding from law enforcement for years. Apparently, he'd been involved in some white-collar financial crimes, and to avoid prison time, he faked his death and left everyone behind, including, or so I thought, Amanda. But here's where it gets worse. Amanda knew. She knew he was alive the whole time. They'd stayed in touch, and she helped him cover it up. The whole widow story was just a smokescreen. She never intended to move on. I was just a piece in whatever plan they had. Maybe for money, maybe for a clean front. I felt sick. Marcus was open with me, but not in a way that felt like repentance. It was more like bragging. I don't think he knew who I was at first, just some guy his wife had married. He probably thought Amanda had conned me quietly and that I was none the wiser. But when I told him I was her husband, the man she married after he was dead, his entire tone shifted. He became defensive, like I was the one in the wrong for showing up, for asking questions, for uncovering their web of lies. I walked away that night with a storm brewing inside me. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was angry. Furious, really. And I knew I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I hired a private investigator the very next day. I needed solid proof. Not just Marcus's appearance, but documents, phone records, anything that could prove Amanda had committed fraud. Because let's be honest, she married me under false pretenses. She claimed to be a widow, lied to obtain legal benefits from me, and potentially helped a fugitive remain hidden. I had to tread carefully, but I wasn't backing down. The private investigator didn't disappoint. In 2 weeks, he brought me a folder full of bank records, emails, and text messages. Some from burner phones, others traced to Amanda's work email, that showed clear communication between her and Marcus, going back years. Even during our wedding planning season, she'd been texting him, arranging meetups under aliases and coded language. It was like something out of a bad crime show. But it was real. It was my life. Armed with that evidence, I went straight to a lawyer, who then helped me file a report with federal authorities. I had to relive every embarrassing detail. How I met her, how she manipulated me, how she sold me a false story of grief and loss. I told them everything. It was humiliating, but necessary. A few weeks later, the FBI took over. I was shocked by how quickly things moved. Within days, Amanda was arrested at her office. She was blindsided. Her coworkers watched as she was led out in handcuffs, her lies unraveling in real time. I didn't go to the courthouse the first day, but I watched the news reports. The headlines were brutal. Woman fakes widowhood to marry again. Husband found alive. Our wedding photos were everywhere, and suddenly my shame was public. But for once, I didn't feel weak or stupid. I felt vindicated. Marcus was arrested too. His time hiding had finally caught up with him, and now he'd have to answer for both his original crimes and this new web of fraud. Amanda faced multiple charges: marriage fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and even identity falsification. I found out through my attorney that she'd been receiving financial assistance from a few widows' organizations, grants, housing perks, all while living a double life. It was deeper than I ever imagined.